My parents didn't put me at the family table at my golden brother's wedding. But then, I, 35F, come from a long line of successful restaurateurs in upstate New York. My father, 65 meters, runs our family's traditional Italian restaurant with an iron fist, while my mother, 60F, manages all the staff. Then there's my older brother Mike, 38 meters, the golden child groomed to take over the business. For the past decade, I've worked at Liberty Mutual Insurance, climbing the corporate ladder until I became a senior claims adjuster. My office on the 28th floor had a stunning view of Central Park, and my name regularly appeared on quarterly performance awards. On paper, I was living the American dream, a six-figure salary, a comfortable condo in Manhattan, and the pride of my parents who never missed a chance to brag about their successful corporate daughter. But every morning, as I stared at my computer screen reviewing accident claims, I felt like I was slowly suffocating. The only thing that kept me going was my secret escape, my lunch break spent at the small rooftop garden I'd created on our office building. I'd convinced management to let me transform the neglected space, funding it entirely from my own pocket. My coworkers thought I was crazy, spending $1,000 on soil, planters, and seasonal flowers. But those precious minutes surrounded by herbs and flowering plants were the only times I felt truly alive. My true sanctuary was Grandma Rose's garden, where I spent nearly every weekend. Her Victorian house on the outskirts of town was surrounded by the most magnificent garden I'd ever seen. While my brother spent his weekends learning the restaurant business, I was learning about soil pH, companion planting, and the language of flowers from Grandma Rose. I remember one particularly meaningful day when I was helping her plant tulip bulbs for spring. It was early October, and the autumn air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. Grandma noticed my hands lingering in the soil longer than necessary. "You feel it too, don't you?" she asked, her weathered hands patting the earth gently. "That connection to the earth. Not everyone has it, you know? It's a gift." I nodded, unable to explain how right it felt to work with plants, how alive I felt in her garden. That day, she showed me her prized collection of gardening journals, decades of handwritten notes about every plant she'd ever grown, complete with pressed flowers and detailed sketches. "Someday," she said, "these will be yours, when you're ready to follow your true path." The turning point came during last year's Thanksgiving dinner. The usual family gathering at the restaurant after hours, with the smell of turkey and Dad's secret recipe gravy filling the air. Mike was showing off the restaurant's new wine cellar, his latest project that Dad had funded without hesitation. Mom was discussing plans for expanding the catering business, while I sat there, fingering the acceptance letter from the New York Botanical Gardens School of Professional Horticulture in my pocket. Finally, between the turkey and pumpkin pie, I gathered my courage. "I'm going back to school," I said, my voice barely steady. "I've enrolled in the Botanical Gardens landscape design program." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face turned the color of the cranberry sauce, while Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Mike let out a snort, nearly choking on his wine. "You're what?" Dad's voice boomed across the table, making the wine glasses vibrate. "You're not getting any younger, and you want to throw away your career to play with plants?" Mom's eyes filled with tears, her hand clutching her chest dramatically. "But honey, you're a senior claims adjuster. Do you know how many people would kill for your position? What about your 401ks? Your health insurance?" Mike, who'd been calling me the gardener since we were kids whenever he caught me tending to Mom's houseplants, couldn't contain his amusement. "So you're actually going to become a real gardener now? Have you lost your mind? What's next? Living in a treehouse?" My hands were shaking under the table, but I forced myself to continue. "I've already submitted my resignation letter. My last day is December 15th. Classes start in January." Dad slammed his fist on the table, making the plates jump. "If you do this, don't expect any help from us. We didn't put you through business school just to watch you throw it all away on some midlife crisis." Only Grandma Rose remained calm, setting down her wine glass deliberately. "Joe," she said to my father, her voice carrying that quiet authority that could still make him feel like a small boy, "when was the last time you were truly happy doing something you didn't choose for yourself?" The day after the Thanksgiving disaster, I drove to Grandma Rose's house, feeling defeated. I found her in her garden, pruning her prized roses despite the November chill. She was wearing her favorite faded blue gardening apron, the one with pockets full of pruning tools and plant markers. "They don't understand, Grandma," I said, helping her with the pruning. "They think I'm throwing my life away. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am crazy to start over at 35. Grandma Rose set down her shears and looked at me with those wise eyes that had seen so much life. "Your parents just want what's best for you, dear, but they don't see the world the same way we do. There's magic in these plants, in the earth itself. You have a gift, and it would be a sin to waste it." She led me to her greenhouse, where she kept her most delicate plants. The warm, humid air enveloped us as she showed me a small orchid struggling to bloom. "Look at this one," Everyone said it was beyond saving, but I knew better. Sometimes the most beautiful things take time to reveal themselves. Just like you, my dear. That winter, I started my classes at the New York Botanical Garden. My savings from the insurance company would cover 2 years of education and basic living expenses. I downsized to a smaller apartment in the Bronx, closer to the school, trading my Manhattan view for a tiny balcony where I could experiment with container gardening. The program was more challenging than I'd expected. Landscape design wasn't just about making things pretty. It involved complex calculations, architectural principles, and a deep understanding of ecology. Every night, I'd fall into bed exhausted but fulfilled, my dreams full of garden plants and plant combinations. My classmate Rachel, 28F, with her vibrant red hair and infectious enthusiasm, became my closest ally. "You should see your face when you're designing," she told me one day as we worked on our CAG projects. "It's like you're finally speaking your native language." But family gatherings became an exercise in endurance. I still attended Sunday dinners at the restaurant, though I'd moved from the family table to sitting at the bar. Mike would make snide comments about whether I'd learned to push a lawnmower properly yet. Dad would pointedly discuss Mike's plans for expanding the restaurant, while Mom would slip me newspaper clippings about corporate job openings. 6 months into my studies, I entered a small garden design competition. It wasn't anything huge, just a local event sponsored by the city's gardening society. My design focused on creating sustainable urban spaces that could serve both environmental and social needs. To my surprise, I won first place. The local paper even ran a small article about it. I excitedly shared the news at our next Sunday dinner, hoping this might finally change their perspective. Instead, Dad barely looked up from his plate. "That's nice, honey, but when are you going to get serious about your life?" Mike chimed in with his usual smirk. "Hey, maybe you can design a garden for the restaurant's dumpster area. Make it look real fancy." My mother, trying to be helpful in her own way, suggested, "You know, Liberty Mutual would probably take you back if you apologized. I heard from Mrs. Henderson that they haven't filled your position yet." That night, as I drove home with tears blurring my vision, I called Grandma Rose. She listened patiently as I poured out my frustrations. "Your father was the same way when he started the restaurant," she revealed. "His father wanted him to be a lawyer. Now look at him. So convinced his way is the only way. Life has a funny way of coming full circle, dear." As months passed, my skills grew. I started getting small commissions, first from friends, then from their friends. My container garden designs were featured in a local lifestyle blog, but my family remained unmoved. Dad would change the subject whenever my work came up, while Mike continued his gardener jokes with increasing venom. Then came the news that would change everything. Grandma Rose was diagnosed with aggressive cancer. Within weeks, she was gone. The last time I saw her, she was propped up in her hospital bed, still trying to give me gardening advice. "The winter bulbs?" she whispered, her voice weak but insistent. "Don't forget to plant them deep enough. And remember, my dear, you're doing exactly what you were meant to do." Little did I know then that my brother's upcoming wedding would become the catalyst for events that would completely transform our family dynamics. But that's a story that deserves its own telling. Update 1. After my last post got so much attention, I wanted to share what happened at my brother's wedding and the aftermath. It's been 3 weeks since my last post, and things have taken quite a turn. First, there was a surprising development with Grandma Rose's will reading. She left me her entire house and garden, a property worth well over $800,000 in today's market. Dad had been eyeing that land for years, planning to turn it into additional parking for the restaurant. When the lawyer announced her decision, Dad's face turned that familiar shade of purple. "This is ridiculous," he exploded. "She's going to turn it into some hippie garden center or something." Mike was even more direct. "Great, now she can really play gardener with her own little kingdom." His fiancée Amanda, 32F, snickered beside him, already treating me with the same contempt as my brother. But here's where it gets interesting. The property came with a condition. I had to maintain and develop the garden according to Grandma's vision. She'd left detailed plans and journals, including designs for turning part of the garden into a showcase for sustainable urban landscaping. I threw myself into renovating the garden, working with local conservation groups to preserve some of Grandma's rarest plants. Word got around, and a well-known gardening magazine contacted me about featuring the renovation in their Heritage Garden series. Then came my brother's wedding. The invitation arrived in a thick cream envelope, dripping with gold foil and self-importance. It was clearly designed to impress Amanda's wealthy family. Her father owns half the real estate in our county. I decided to attend, wearing a simple but elegant designer dress I'd splurged on with some of my competition prize money. The ceremony was at the most expensive venue in town, with Mike making sure everyone knew he'd paid for it all himself, though I later learned Dad had helped significantly. The real drama started at the reception. Despite being immediate family, I was seated at table 23, literally the furthest table from the main family table, next to the kitchen doors. My place card actually read the gardener instead of my name. Amanda made a point of introducing me to her society friends, and this is Mike's sister, the one who what exactly do you do again? Plant flowers or something? Her friends tittered behind their champagne glasses. But karma has a way of evening things out. The venue had hired a renowned event planner who recognized me from the Gardening magazine article. She came over to my table, exclaiming loudly about how honored she was to meet me. Your sustainable garden designs are revolutionary. I've been following your renovation project on Instagram. The real kicker came when Amanda's uncle, who happens to be the mayor, took the microphone for his speech. He mentioned seeing my work on the city's new Sustainable Parks project and praised my innovative designs. Suddenly, all those society people who'd been snickering were looking at me with new interest. Dad and Mike sat there, faces frozen, as the mayor continued praising the talented landscape architect in the family. Amanda was furiously whispering to her friends, trying to do damage control. After the speech, several of Amanda's relatives came to talk to me about designing their gardens. One of them was the head of the city's Parks and Recreation Department. He mentioned they were looking for innovative designers for their upcoming urban renewal project. The next day, Mom called, the first time she'd reached out in months. Her voice was hesitant. I saw the magazine article about Rosa's garden. The photographs. They're beautiful. You've really made something special there. Dad and Mike still haven't acknowledged anything, but I've noticed the restaurant's website now mentions their family connection to sustainable urban design in their About page. Ironic, considering they still haven't congratulated me on any of my achievements. I'm meeting with the Parks Department next week about the urban renewal project. It would be my biggest commission yet. The proposed site? Right next to my father's restaurant. Sometimes life has a way of coming full circle, just like Grandma Rose always said. Update 2. Thanks for all the supportive comments on my last update. It's been 2 months since the wedding, and the situation has developed in ways I never expected. The Parks Department project turned out to be bigger than I initially thought. They weren't just looking for a simple garden design. They wanted to transform an entire city block into a sustainable urban green space, complete with community gardens and an educational center. The catch? The project would significantly reduce parking space around neighboring businesses, including my father's restaurant. When the initial plans were presented at the city council meeting, I saw my father and Mike sitting in the back row, their faces growing darker with each slide of my presentation. The project would remove the parking lot they'd been using unofficially for years, replacing it with a vertical garden and community space. During the public comment period, Mike stood up, his face red. This project will kill local businesses. Has anyone considered the impact on established restaurants in the area? He deliberately avoided looking at me. That's when Amanda's uncle, the mayor, spoke up. Actually, studies show that urban green spaces increase foot traffic and property values. Your sister's design includes dedicated restaurant zones with outdoor seating areas. If anything, this should boost your business. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Several council members were visibly trying not to smile. But here's where it gets interesting. Last week, a Michelin inspector made an unannounced visit to our family restaurant. This was the moment my father had been dreaming of for decades. However, there was one small problem. Their signature herb garden, which supplied the fresh herbs for their famous dishes, had mysteriously started failing. I was at Grandma's house, working on my project plans, when I got a frantic call from my mother. The herbs are dying. The inspector is coming back tomorrow for dinner. Your father, he's not handling it well. An hour later, my father called. His voice, usually so commanding, sounded strained. We need your help. Oh, I kept my voice neutral. I thought gardening wasn't a real job. After a long pause, he said, "What's your consulting fee?" I named a figure that made him choke. $30,000 for emergency garden rehabilitation and consultation. That's highway robbery, he spluttered. Actually, that's below market rate for emergency horticultural crisis management. But I'll give you the family discount, $25,000. They paid. Within 24 hours, I had diagnosed the problem, improper soil pH and drainage issues, implemented a solution, and saved their precious herbs. The inspector's visit was a success. The local paper ran a story about the restaurant's Michelin star potential, prominently featuring their innovative herb garden designed by a renowned landscape architect and family member. The reporter asked my father about the garden's design. I watched him struggle to swallow his pride as he had to acknowledge my contribution. The best part? The failed garden wasn't my doing at all. They had simply been following outdated maintenance procedures from an old gardening book. Their refusal to consult a professional, specifically me, had nearly cost them their dream review. Now, every time someone compliments the restaurant's herb garden, my father has to smile and mention that his daughter, the landscape architect, designed it. The word gardener hasn't been used as an insult since. But the real satisfaction came from an unexpected source. Amanda's mother, a notorious society queen, hired me to design her new showcase garden. Her explanation? Well, darling, if you're good enough for the city's urban renewal project, you're good enough for us. The look on Mike and Amanda's faces when they saw me at their house, discussing plans with her mother over expensive tea in the conservatory, was priceless, especially when Amanda's mother mentioned my fee, triple what I charged my father, with no family discount. Next week, I'm officially opening my design studio. I found the perfect location, that prime spot next to the restaurant where my father had been planning to expand. The large windows offer a clear view of their herb garden, which I now maintain for a substantial monthly fee. Life has a funny way of working out. A substantial monthly fee. Life has a funny way of working out. Grandma Rose would have appreciated the irony. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update, and I want to share the conclusion to this story. Your support throughout this journey has been incredible. The urban renewal project next to the restaurant started gaining national attention. Several major design magazines featured my sustainable vertical gardens, and a prominent environmental organization nominated the project for their annual Innovation Award. The publicity generated unexpected interest in my father's restaurant, but not in the way he'd anticipated. People began coming specifically to see that innovative restaurant with the amazing herb garden designed by the gardener turned architect. Food critics started mentioning the harmonious blend of culinary and horticultural expertise in the family. Last month, a documentary crew from a major streaming service contacted me about featuring the project in their series about urban transformation. They were particularly interested in the compelling family narrative, the story of how the restaurateur's daughter revolutionized urban gardening. The producer wanted to film at both my design studio and the restaurant. My father couldn't refuse without looking petty, especially since local business organizations were praising the project's positive impact on the area. Food and Wine magazine wanted to do a feature on the culinary garden connection. During the filming, the producer asked my father about his initial opposition to my career change. The camera caught his uncomfortable squirming as he tried to explain himself. Well, we just wanted what was best for her. The next day, I received an unexpected visit at my studio. My father stood there, looking older and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. He held a worn leather-bound book, his original recipe journal from when he first started the restaurant. Your grandmother, he said quietly. She was the only one who supported me when I wanted to open the restaurant. My father wanted me to be a lawyer. He said cooking was beneath our family. He placed the recipe book on my desk. I became exactly like him, didn't I? Trying to force my children into the life I thought they should have. The restoration of their herb garden had expanded into a full rooftop garden project, which now supplied 80% of their herbs and vegetables. The waiting list for garden view tables stretched months ahead. Food critics praised the farm-to-table synergy, and the restaurant's Instagram following exploded with photos of the vertical gardens. Even Mike had to acknowledge the change. During a recent business meeting, yes, they now had to schedule official meetings with me. He admitted through gritted teeth that their revenues had increased 40% since the garden renovation. Amanda's attitude underwent a remarkable transformation after her mother appointed me as the official landscape architect for their country club renovation. Suddenly, she was telling everyone how she always knew there was something special about her sister-in-law's connection with nature. The final piece fell into place last week. The city's sustainability board, impressed by the success of our urban renewal project, proposed a major expansion. They wanted to create a green corridor, connecting several local businesses, with my father's restaurant as the centerpiece. The catch? The restaurant would need to convert their remaining parking lot into a demonstration garden. The city offered substantial tax incentives and promised to feature the restaurant in their tourism campaigns. My father called an emergency family meeting, a real one this time, not just a dinner where they talked over me. For the first time, I sat at the head of the table in the restaurant's private dining room. We need your help, he said, his voice heavy with meaning. Not just as a consultant, as a partner. The proposal they presented was unexpected. They wanted to create a joint venture, combining the restaurant and my design studio into an integrated culinary and horticultural experience center. My father even suggested renaming it to include my professional name. Mike, looking like he'd bitten into a lemon, presented the financial projections. The numbers were impossible to ignore. Even he had to admit that my gardening hobby had turned into a significant business opportunity. Mom pulled out an old photo she'd kept hidden, me at 6 years old, proudly showing off my first tomato plant in Grandma Rose's garden. We should have seen it then, she said softly. You were never meant for a corporate office. The integration of the businesses is now underway. The restaurant's new logo features an elegant herb leaf design. The menu proudly declares from our garden to your table, and each dish lists the specific garden location of its ingredients. Last week, a national magazine included our project in their top 10 innovative family businesses list. The irony wasn't lost on anyone when they specifically praised how the second-generation restaurateur family embraced their daughter's vision to revolutionize urban dining. Grandma Rose's garden, where it all started, has become a teaching center for sustainable urban agriculture. The waiting list for workshops is months long, and we're partnering with local schools for educational programs. The biggest surprise? Dad has started spending his mornings in the garden before the restaurant opens. I recently caught him carefully tending to the herbs, wearing one of our branded garden aprons. He looked more peaceful than I'd seen him in years. Remember how they used to mock me as the gardener at family gatherings? Now, the host greets customers with, "Welcome to Garden Table," where the gardener's vision meets culinary excellence. Yesterday, I received a letter that brought tears to my eyes. It was from a high school student who had attended one of our gardening workshops. She wrote about how seeing my story in the documentary inspired her to stand up to her parents who wanted her to become a doctor when her passion was environmental science. The letter included a sketch of a garden design she created, remarkably similar to my early drawings in Grandma Rose's journals. I've invited her to intern with us this summer, launching our first youth mentorship program. This whole experience has taught me something profound about family legacies. Sometimes honoring your family's legacy doesn't mean following the path they laid